At the residents' meeting, the door was slammed in Sarah's face. "You're nobody here anymore," said the head of the HOA. He had no idea he'd just kicked out a retired federal judge. A couple of weeks later, he was sitting in court, visibly paling. But what happened next shocked even him. Let's start from the very beginning. In one of New York's quiet residential neighborhoods, behind neat lawns and tidy facades where neighbors greeted each other by name for years, life flowed calmly and predictably. It was here that Sarah Johnson lived, an elderly woman with kind eyes and her ever-present folder tucked under her arm. She knew everyone in the building by name, remembered whose child was born when, who got divorced, who changed jobs. But more importantly, she had always been part of something bigger. From an early age of involvement in the Homeowners Association, Sarah felt that her voice mattered. She didn't just attend meetings. She asked questions, raised tough issues, dove into the intricacies of housing laws, and always did so with respect. However, in recent months, the atmosphere in the building began to shift. Ever since George Miller, a charismatic but sharp-tongued man in his 50s, became the new head of the HOA, the familiar rules had started to erode. He sought total control, canceling meetings without notice, passing resolutions without votes, shutting down discussions the moment they became uncomfortable. Some residents began to sense something was wrong, but few dared to speak up. George wielded authority like a weapon, and many didn't want to clash with the one holding the keys to the budget. And so, one evening, Sarah came to the general meeting as she always did. In her hands was the same old folder with a printed copy of the charter. In her eyes, the usual focus. But something felt different this time. Standing at the door to the meeting hall was George himself. He stood with a folder in his outstretched arms, like a bouncer at a VIP event, looking down at her with a cold, almost indifferent smile. "Sarah, you cannot attend the meeting," he said evenly, almost mechanically. Sarah frowned. "Excuse me, what did you say?" She even let out a slight chuckle, thinking this was some kind of misunderstanding. "You're not on the list of approved members. By the board's decision, only selected participants are allowed tonight. I'll have to ask you to leave." A hush fell. A few residents already inside turned around. Some looked away. Others froze, unsure what to do. Sarah stood still. Her fingers gripped the folder tighter. Something clenched in her chest, like a cold stone dropped onto her heart. "I'm a member of this community. I live here. I've attended every meeting for over 20 years. I have a right to know what's happening in my own home." Her voice trembled slightly, but it still carried strength. "We have new rules," George replied without blinking. "Please, don't make this difficult." For a moment, Sarah considered brushing past him and walking in, but she knew, if she did, he'd twist every word, every move against her. That's exactly what he wanted, a reason. Slowly, barely feeling the ground beneath her feet, she turned and walked away. The door slammed behind her, and in that moment something clicked inside Sarah. It wasn't pain, not yet, just silence. And in that silence, a thought was born. So, it's going to be war.
The nights in that neighborhood were always quiet. The branches of the old maple outside swayed gently in the evening breeze, and the kitchen clock ticked steadily, counting the seconds. But inside Sarah Johnson's mind, there was neither silence nor peace. Sitting at her old oak table in the living room, she stared at a single spot, the very folder she had brought with her to the meeting. She had never even opened it. Inside were prepared questions, budget excerpts, even proposals for improving the courtyard. Everything was ready, but she hadn't even been allowed through the door. This wasn't just a personal humiliation. It was a message: you've been excluded. And no one said a word. No one stood up, no one objected. She felt something tighten inside her, a dull ache slowly morphing into something more, into anger, into despair, into a clear, sharpened hatred. And with every passing hour that hatred found more reasons to exist. The very next day, Mr. Buckley from the third floor approached her. He complained that maintenance fees had suddenly gone up by 17%, with no explanation from the HOA. Then Mrs. Lopez stopped by. She said George had signed a contract for basement repairs with some unknown company, without any resident approval. The money was gone. The paperwork? Not shown. Over the course of a week, Sarah heard more disturbing stories than she had in the past 10 years. Neighbors who once trusted the system now whispered in corners. What united them all was fear and helplessness. That evening, as the streetlights flickered on outside, a quiet knock came at Sarah's door. She opened it, and there stood Mary. The same Mary who had planted roses with her in the courtyard 7 years ago. Her face was tense. "Sarah, we have to do something. This has gone too far," she said the moment she stepped inside. Sarah nodded, as if she'd been waiting for those words. She motioned for Mary to come in, and they sat at the same table where silence had reigned just hours earlier. "I know, Mary." Her voice was calm, but there was something new in it. Steel. "I've already started planning our response." Mary looked at her friend with quiet intensity, and for the first time in a long while, a spark appeared in her eyes, not of fear, but of hope. Sarah stood up, went to the cabinet, and pulled out the old folder, the one with legal printouts, financial breakdowns, budget records. She grabbed her aging laptop from the shelf. "Did you know that the HOA bylaws don't allow decisions without a quorum?" "No," Mary whispered. "Well, he's been doing it for 2 months now. That's where we'll begin." And so began an invisible, but deeply personal war. Sarah was no longer just the neighbor with the notebook. Now she was a commander planning a counterstrike, and her weapon was the truth. From the evening Mary left her apartment, Sarah was no longer the same. She no longer went for her morning walks. Instead, she sat at her table, flipping through old meeting minutes, HOA bank statements, contractor reports. At night, she pored over the New York State Housing Code and local regulations. On yellow sticky notes, she scribbled numbers, dates, names. It was all coming together. A mosaic in which George wasn't just a despot, he was a schemer. One document after another confirmed it. Contracts signed without majority approval. Fees that vanished without a trace. Decisions made without a quorum. Minutes with forged signatures. With every new file, Sarah's anger boiled hotter. Not a storm, not a breakdown. A steady, cold fury. Her rage didn't destroy. It focused her. It disciplined her actions, made them precise, almost surgically clean. One day, returning from the post office, she turned down the hallway on the 3rd floor, and, as if on cue, she ran into him. George walked toward her, unhurried, a folder under his arm. He looked smug as always, smelling of expensive cologne and cigars. He stopped, and the corners of his mouth lifted in that familiar, contemptuous smirk. "Still meddling in things that aren't your concern, Sarah?" he said in a near whisper, looking down on her. She stopped, but this time she didn't lower her gaze, didn't smile politely, didn't try to soften the edges. She looked him straight in the eye. "These things concern all of us, George," she said calmly, clearly. "Every street, every bill, every budget line. You seem to forget, this isn't a corporation, it's a community, and you're not a king, you're a temporary hire, and I will not let you continue violating our rights." For a moment, he seemed stunned. He didn't know this Sarah. He was used to the kind, quiet woman with brochures, but standing before him now was a former federal judge with fire in her soul. He wanted to reply, but no words came. He just shook his head and walked off, a little faster than before. Sarah stayed standing in the hallway, not with a sense of victory but with clarity, the certainty that she had to see this through. From that moment, her fight was no longer personal. It was more than a feud with George. It was a battle for principles, for the law, for respect, for the right to never again have a door slammed in someone's face. Sarah knew it wouldn't be easy, but she was ready. Not just mentally, she was prepared legally, emotionally, and strategically. She had gathered everything: copies of payment records, resident testimonies, photos of falsified documents, financial reports, printed emails in which George had signed off on decisions he had no authority to make. What once were suspicions had become a clear, structured case. And she wasn't alone. Neighbors joined her. People who, not long ago, were afraid to even raise their eyes, now stood beside her. They were united not only by anger but by respect, because someone had dared to say, "Enough," and had led them forward. The courtroom was cool. The air smelled of paper, coffee, and tension. Sarah sat calmly, dressed in a suit, her hair neatly tied back, without a hint of anxiety. Her lawyer, a sharp and promising young attorney, stood by her side, but she was in control. The door opened, the judge entered, and in that moment George Miller went pale. He recognized her instantly, the face he'd seen in elevators, hallways by the flower beds. But now she wore a robe and bore the seal of the law. This was a different Sarah. Sarah Johnson, retired federal judge. He swallowed hard, stepped forward. "Your Honor, I didn't know that you—" Sarah looked at him coldly, firmly, without a trace of a smile. "Yes, George, I'm not just your neighbor. I'm a judge. And now all your schemes are coming to light. The law isn't something you play with, especially when you're playing with the lives of people who trusted you with their home." The trial didn't take long. The facts spoke for themselves. The court found George guilty of overstepping authority, financial misconduct, and document falsification. He was immediately removed from his position as HOA president. He was ordered to repay all misappropriated funds, and several incidents were forwarded to the district attorney for further investigation. A week later, a meeting was held in the courtyard. A real meeting. Transparent, with voting, reports, and people unafraid to speak. Sarah was nominated honorary chair of the Oversight Board. She declined. She said her mission wasn't power, it was order. And now that everything was back in the hands of the residents, they just needed to remember. Law isn't just paper, it's responsibility. Her neighbors applauded. Someone even wiped away a tear. And in that moment, Sarah didn't feel pride or triumph, but a deep, warm sense of fulfillment. She hadn't just won a case. She'd given people their voice back. And the building was home again.